The galaxy believed humans were locked away for a reason. They believed the quarantine kept everyone safe. They believed no one would ever be desperate enough to call them. They were wrong. And when the signal finally went out, entire star systems went silent in fear, not because help was coming, but because humanity was. A peace that never needed weapons. The world of Alaris had never prepared for war. Its cities curved upward like living art, grown instead of built. Towers shimmered softly under the light of 3 suns, and rivers of glowing pollen drifted through the air like slow snowfall. The Elori people had shaped their civilization around harmony with nature, harmony with each other, and harmony with the galaxy. They were tall, slender beings with smooth, luminous skin and wide, expressive eyes. Their hands were delicate, built for creation, not destruction. For over 8,000 years, no Elori child had ever been taught how to fight. They had no armies, no shields, no weapons. They had never needed them. Until the sky broke open. The day the stars turned red. High Speaker Lyrian Sae stood at the central observatory, her hands resting against the cold crystal rail. She had guided her people through droughts, stellar storms, and political crises. Nothing had ever shaken her like this. Above Alaris, the stars were moving. Not drifting, descending. Hundreds of massive warships tore through the upper atmosphere, their hulls jagged and dark, glowing with heat and violence. Fire streaked across the sky as orbital platforms shattered into molten debris. Entire cities vanished in seconds. What are the numbers? Lyrian asked quietly. The words came out calm. Her voice did not. Advisor Kethranol, his eyes reflecting burning continents, swallowed before answering. Confirmed count, 700 vessels. Possibly more still arriving. 700. The Elori possessed fewer than 40 spacefaring ships, all unarmed exploration craft. The invaders were the Dravok Dominion. Every civilization knew the name. The Dominion that took everything. The Dravok were giants, towering reptilian beings wrapped in thick, armored scales. Their culture worshipped conquest. Worlds were not places to live, they were trophies. 23 civilizations had fallen to them. Some were enslaved. Some were erased. Some were reduced to nothing more than museum exhibits labeled extinct. Now, Alaris was next. A transmission cut through the chaos. The image of a Dravok warlord filled the chamber. Massive, scarred, eyes burning with confidence. This world is now property of the Dominion, the warlord declared. Surrender your population for labor, or be cleansed. You have one planetary rotation to decide. The signal ended. Silence followed. Some of the Elori Council wept openly. Others stood frozen, unable to process a reality they had never imagined. Lyrian closed her eyes. They had believed kindness was enough. The forbidden option. We still have one choice. The voice came from Archivist Malin, the youngest member of the council. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, holding a small, ancient device sealed in transparent crystal. Lyrian recognized it instantly. The emergency beacon. No, Kethra said sharply. We were warned never to use it unless extinction was certain. Malin looked at the burning sky. Is this not extinction? The beacon had been gifted by the Galactic Accord centuries ago, accompanied by strict instructions and heavier warnings. It contacted only one species. A species so unpredictable that the galaxy had locked them behind enforced borders. A species granted territory not as a reward, but as a containment strategy. Humans. Stories about them were whispered, not taught. They came from a death world. A place of constant disasters, violent ecosystems, and internal wars that never seemed to end. They were creative. They were stubborn. And worst of all, they refused to quit. A choice between certainty and fear. They are monsters, Kethra whispered. The Accord feared them more than any empire. Lyrian took the beacon into her hands. It felt heavier than it should have, as if history itself weighed upon it. Monsters, she said softly, or survivors. Another explosion rocked the city. A distant tower collapsed, sending shockwaves through the chamber. We are already doomed, Lyrian continued. The only question is whether we die alone, or with help that scares our enemies more than it scares us. No one spoke. Lyrian activated the beacon. A pulse of energy rippled outward, invisible yet powerful, cutting across interstellar space toward a region marked on every galactic map in warning red. Human space. When the signal was heard. Light years away, inside a sector most civilizations pretended did not exist, ancient systems awakened. Alarms echoed through massive shipyards. Long silent engines began to hum. Data screens flooded with incoming information. A single phrase appeared across multiple command decks. External distress signal received. Source: non-human civilization. Status: active invasion. Admiral Rhea Calder, commander of the United Terran Defense Fleet, stared at the display. So, she said calmly, someone finally pushed them far enough. Around her, officers exchanged looks that carried no fear, only focus. Humanity had not been waiting to conquer. They had been waiting to respond. The first shiver of fear. Back above Alaris, the Dravok flagship maintained orbit. Warlord Kraz Thul watched reports scroll across his command throne. Everything was proceeding as expected. Resistance was nearly non-existent. Then his sensor officer stiffened. "My lord, an anomalous signal has been detected." Kraz snarled. "Explain." "It originated from the planet. Long range. Directed toward human territory." The bridge fell silent. Even Dravok legends spoke of humans, not as prey, but as variables. Uncontrollable. Unpredictable. Kraz bared his teeth in irritation. "Quarantined animals," he growled. "If they come, we will break them too." Yet deep within his armored chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Unease. The beacon had been activated. The message had been sent. And humanity was no longer confined to silence. What answered would not just change the fate of Alaris. It would rewrite what the galaxy believed about power, fear, and survival. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Dravok sensors. Not alarms. Not explosions. Silence. Entire sections of deep space monitoring went dark at once, as if space itself had swallowed the signals. Sensor Officer Vral stared at his console, claws hovering uncertainly. "My lord," he said slowly, "multiple regions have gone blank." Warlord Kraz Thul rose from his throne. "Malfunction." "No," Vral replied. "It's deliberate. Something is blocking our scans." Kraz turned toward the main viewport. The stars were still there, but they felt wrong. The arrival no one expected. Then space bent. Not ripped open violently, like Dravok war drives. Not glowing or dramatic. It simply folded. Dark shapes emerged without warning, as if they had always been there and reality had just noticed them. Massive vessels slid into existence, matte black hulls absorbing light instead of reflecting it. No insignias. No broadcast signals. No formation that followed known military doctrine. There were 12 ships. Only 12. A ripple of laughter passed through the Dravok bridge. "That's it," snarled Commander Rethak. 12 ships against 700. Kraz watched silently, because something about them felt wrong. Ships built by experience. The human vessels were ugly. Not broken. Purposeful. Layered armor plates overlapped like scars healed over scars. Engines were recessed deep inside armored housings, protected as if humans expected them to be targeted first. Weapon ports were hidden, not displayed. These were not ships built to intimidate. They were ships built to survive. And they were old. Scans showed hull designs that had evolved, not been redesigned. Each ship carried signs of modification, adaptation, and repair, as if they had been through wars that no one else remembered. "Identify them," Kraz ordered. Vral hesitated. "They are not broadcasting identification, but our archives confirm design lineage." He swallowed. Terran origin. Human. The laughter died instantly. The message that changed everything. One human ship moved forward slightly. Then a signal came through. Clear. Calm. Translated perfectly into Dravok language. This is Admiral Rear Calder of the United Terran Defense Fleet. No threat. No posturing. Just fact. You are engaging in an unprovoked assault on a protected civilization. You have 5 minutes to withdraw your forces. The bridge erupted in furious noise. Kraz slammed his claw into the command console. Protected by whom? He roared. The human response came immediately. By us. The Dravok laugh, one last time. Kraz stood tall, spreading his massive arms. You bring 12 ships, he sneered, against an empire that has burned worlds. You are outnumbered 60 to 1. There was a pause. Then Admiral Calder replied. We are aware. Another pause. We calculated that number before we arrived. Something in her tone made several Dravok officers shift uneasily. You have 4 minutes remaining, Calder finished. Why humans fight differently? Kraz snarled. Fire warning volleys. Show them their place. Dozens of Dravok cruisers powered weapons, space lighting up with energy signatures. Plasma bolts tore toward the human fleet. The human ships did not scatter. They did not retreat. They advanced. Their shields flared briefly, not bright, but dense. Several shots struck home, and did nothing. Then the humans fired back. No bright beams. No massive blasts. Just precision. Dravok sensor arrays vanished first. Then communication relays. Then power distribution nodes. One by one, ships lost coordination, drifting confused and blind. They are not targeting hulls. Vral shouted. They are disabling systems. Kraz's eyes widened. Humans weren't trying to destroy the fleet. They were taking it apart. On the ground, hope appears. On Alaris, high-speaker Lyrian watched the sky change. Dravok bombardment slowed. Then stopped. Her advisors stared as unfamiliar ships held the sky, dark guardians against the burning stars. They came, Malin whispered. Lyrian felt something she had not felt since the invasion began. Hope. Human soldiers. Human choices. Dropships descended. Human dropships. They landed between Dravok forces and terrified Elori shelters. Human soldiers emerged, clad in armor that showed signs of use, not Polish. Their movements were calm, coordinated, efficient. They did not shout. They did not boast. They simply worked. One human knelt beside a wounded Elori child, sealing injuries with practiced care. Another redirected civilians toward safety while covering them with his own body. The Elori stared in disbelief. These were the monsters. The Dravok make their choice. Back in orbit, Kraz watched his fleet fall into chaos. We can still win. Rethak insisted. Overwhelm them. Calder's voice returned. Time's up. Human ships spread slightly, not to retreat, but to reveal something hidden until now. Weapon bays opened. What emerged terrified even the Dravok. Not superweapons. Kinetic arrays. Simple. Brutal. Precise. Human philosophy made manifest, if energy weapons fail, throw mass harder. The first Dravok battleship vanished in a silent collision, its shields bypassed by sheer momentum. Another followed. No explosions. Just absence. Kraz realized the truth too late. Humans did not fight for spectacle. They fought to end things. Fear reaches the galaxy. Across nearby systems, observers watched feeds with growing horror. 12 human ships dismantling an Empire fleet. Not with rage. Not with hatred. But with experience earned the hard way. Galactic analysts began rewriting threat assessments in real time. The quarantine was never about protecting the galaxy from humans attacking. It was about protecting the galaxy from what humans would become when they decided to help. The Dravok had come to conquer a peaceful world. Instead, they awakened a force that had learned war the hard way. And this was only the beginning. The Dravok had never retreated from a battle. They had lost ships before. They had faced resistance before. But retreat, real, strategic withdrawal, was something that belonged to weaker species. Yet now, drifting powerless in orbit above Alaris, Supreme Warlord Kraz Thul felt something unfamiliar pressing against his thoughts. Fear. Not the fear of death. The fear of being understood by the enemy. Humans didn't chase, they cornered. Human ships did not pursue fleeing Dravok vessels. They anticipated them. Every escape vector the Dravok attempted was already blocked. Gravity wells activated precisely where Dravok navigation systems tried to jump. Mines appeared in empty space seconds before ships arrived. How do they know? Commander Rethak hissed. Kraz watched data scroll across his command display. Predictive models, movement probabilities, calculated responses. They are not reacting, he said slowly. They are predicting. Humans were not fighting moment to moment. They were fighting 3 moves ahead. A lesson written in silence. One damaged Dravok cruiser attempted to power its weapons again. Before it could fire, a human ship drifted closer, not aggressively, but deliberately. A single message transmitted. "Shut down your reactor," Admiral Calder said calmly. "Or it will overload in 12 seconds. Rethak laughed nervously. A bluff. The countdown appeared on the Dravok screens. 12. 11. Kraz stared at the human vessel. It wasn't aiming weapons. It didn't need to. "Shut it down," Kraz ordered. The reactor powered off at 2 seconds remaining. The human ship drifted away without another word. The message was clear. Humans didn't need to kill you to prove they could. On the ground, the war changed shape. Dravok ground forces advanced toward Elori shelter zones, and stopped. Not because they were blocked. Because the terrain itself turned against them. Human engineers had already been at work. Collapsed tunnels funneled Dravok troops into narrow paths. Sensors were jammed by low-tech interference. Heat signatures vanished and reappeared unpredictably. Elori observers watched in confusion as human soldiers moved like ghosts, striking quickly and disappearing again. "They don't hold ground," one Elori elder whispered. Lyrian watched closely. "No," she said. "They control it." Persistence. Weaponized. Dravok warriors were powerful in short bursts. Their biology favored strength and intimidation. Humans favored endurance. Hours passed. Then days. Dravok troops grew tired. Supplies dwindled. Command cohesion broke down. Human units rotated seamlessly, never allowing pressure to ease. Every time a Dravok unit paused, humans were already there. Not charging. Waiting. One Dravok commander collapsed from exhaustion during a firefight, unable to continue. A human soldier dragged him to safety, not to execute him, but to restrain him. "You spared me," the Dravok gasped. The human replied simply, "You're done fighting." The Elori begin to understand. The Elori had believed war was chaos. They were wrong. War, as humans practiced it, was structure, logistics, timing, psychology. Human medics worked non-stop. Engineers rebuilt Elori infrastructure mid-battle. Communication teams coordinated civilian evacuations with quiet efficiency. The humans didn't just fight the Dravok. They protected everything else. They planned for aftermath, Malin realized. They planned for after the fighting ends. Lyrian nodded slowly. These beings did not just survive disasters. They prepared for the consequences. A warlord faces reality. Back aboard his flagship, Kraz Thul watched reports of surrender multiply. Entire Dravok battalions were laying down arms, not because they were beaten in battle, but because they were outmatched in endurance. The humans never rushed. They never exhausted themselves. They never stopped. Kraz turned toward the viewport, watching a human ship patrol silently nearby. "How did they survive their world?" he asked quietly. No one answered. The truth humans carried. Admiral Calder addressed her fleet. "They fight hard," she said. "But they don't recover fast. Keep pressure steady. No heroics." A young officer hesitated. "Admiral, why not end it quickly?" Calder's expression didn't change. Because quick endings create martyrs. Long endings create lessons. The officer nodded. Humanity had learned this lesson across centuries of internal conflict. Victory was not about destruction. It was about never giving the enemy a reason to rise again. The galactic eye opens. Across the galaxy, observers stopped calling this a battle. They began calling it a demonstration. Analysts noted human restraint, controlled force, limited casualties. They also noted something more frightening. Humans were showing what they could do, not what they would do. The implication spread faster than any transmission. If this was humanity holding back, what would they look like unleashed? The moment of surrender. Kraz Thul stood alone as the final message was prepared. "This is Supreme Warlord Kraz Thul of the Dravik Dominion," he transmitted. "We request terms." The response came quickly. "Terms accepted," Admiral Calder replied. "Stand down all forces. You will be escorted." Kraz closed his eyes. The Dravik had come to conquer. They were leaving as students. The war was no longer about survival. It was about understanding what humanity truly was. Not monsters. Not saviors. But something far more dangerous. The war ended quietly. No final explosion. No triumphant broadcast. No victory parade. Just silence returning to the sky above Elaris. Dravik ships powered down one by one, drifting under human escort. Ground forces laid down weapons in neat, almost ritual lines. Human soldiers did not cheer. They did not mock. They simply secured positions and began rebuilding what had been broken. For the Elori, this was the most unsettling part. The violence had stopped, yet the humans remained calm, focused, already thinking ahead. Lyrian walked through the shelter district where thousands of her people huddled only days before. Now, humans were reinforcing structures, restoring power, repairing water systems. Portable medical bays treated injuries with quiet efficiency. A human engineer noticed her watching and offered a small nod. "We'll have the grid stable by tomorrow," he said. "Long-term fixes will take a bit longer." "You speak as if you plan to stay," Lyrian replied carefully. The engineer smiled faintly. "We plan to leave you better than we found you." That sentence spread through Elori networks faster than any official announcement. Across the galaxy, panic was spreading. Emergency councils convened. Diplomatic channels flooded with messages. Species that had once voted to keep humanity isolated now watched recordings of Dravik warships rendered helpless by only 12 Terran vessels. The question echoed everywhere. What else can humans do? Old archives were reopened. Ancient warnings re-examined. Historians realized something terrifying. Humanity had not advanced peacefully. They had advanced through constant crisis. Plagues. Climate collapse. Global wars. Resource scarcity. Near-extinction events. Repeatedly. And every time, they adapted. The Galactic Accord's emergency summit lasted less than 1 hour. The final resolution was simple. The human quarantine was officially dissolved. Not because the galaxy trusted humanity, but because it could no longer afford to misunderstand them. Supreme Warlord Kraz Thul sat inside a containment chamber aboard a human carrier. Not imprisoned. Contained. He had expected cruelty. Instead, he was given medical treatment, food calibrated to his biology, and a chance to speak. Admiral Calder stood across from him, hands clasped behind her back. "You could have destroyed us," Kraz said slowly. "Why didn't you?" Calder met his gaze. "Because you weren't the real threat." Kraz frowned. "Then what is?" Calder's voice was steady. The belief that strength comes from domination instead of responsibility. Kraz said nothing. For the first time in his life, conquest felt small. On Elaris, the Elori gathered in the central plaza. Human banners were nowhere to be seen. No symbols planted. No claims made. Only a single human ship hovered overhead, silent and watchful. Lyrian stepped forward. "We believed peace meant avoiding conflict," she said to her people. Humans have shown us something else. She turned toward the sky. Peace means being ready to protect what matters. The Elori did not cheer. They bowed. Humanity began withdrawing forces within days. Not because they were finished, but because their job was done. Before leaving, human engineers transferred defensive knowledge, not weapons, but systems. Early warning arrays. Evacuation protocols. Crisis training. You won't become like us, Admiral Calder told Lyrian. And you shouldn't. She paused. But you won't be helpless again. Across the galaxy, something shifted. Predator empires paused expansions. Pirate coalitions dissolved overnight. Border wars cooled. Because everyone now understood the rule humanity followed. They don't start fights. They finish them. And they finish them carefully. As the last Terran ship prepared to jump away, Malin asked Lyrian the question every Elori was thinking. Do you think they're dangerous? Lyrian watched the human fleet disappear into folded space. Yes, she said softly. Because they care. The war was over. But the story had just begun. Humanity was no longer a rumor. No longer a warning. They were now a presence. Years passed. The galaxy did not return to what it had been before Ilaris. It could not. Because once you learn that survival can look like humans, you can never unsee it. The Dravik Dominion no longer existed. Not shattered. Not erased. Transformed. Under Terran oversight, former Dravik war worlds were dismantled piece by piece. Not their people, but their systems. Slave infrastructure became civilian networks. Military academies became engineering institutes. Supreme Warlord Kraz Thul stood before a council for the first time in his life, not as a conqueror, but as a representative. He had not been forgiven. But he had been given something far more unsettling. A chance to change. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. They refused every offer. They declined permanent seats of power. They avoided empire. They dismantled any structure that tried to crown them kings. Instead, they did something far stranger. They taught. On dozens of worlds, human advisors worked quietly. They helped planets prepare for disasters that had not yet happened. They taught redundancy, adaptability, crisis response. Not how to fight, but how to endure. When asked why, Admiral Calder gave the same answer every time. Because someone once helped us survive. We're returning the favor. No one ever found records of who that helper was. Some suspected there had never been one. On Ilaris, life had grown stronger than before. The Elori did not become warriors. They became prepared. Cities were rebuilt with evacuation corridors hidden beneath beauty. Early warning systems watched the stars. Children learned not fear, but resilience. High Speaker Lyrian stood at the same observatory years later, watching peaceful ships pass through the sky. Malin joined her. Do you think the galaxy still fears them? Malin asked. Lyrian considered the question. Yes, she said. But differently. Because fear of humans had changed. It was no longer fear of violence. It was fear of consequences. Every species now understood one truth. Humanity could be ignored. Humanity could be left alone. But humanity could never again be underestimated. The Galactic Accord was rewritten. A single clause was added, simple, direct, and universally respected. If humanity answers a distress call, the crisis is already over. No one argued. In human space, life continued as it always had. Messy, loud, creative. Humans argued, disagreed, joked, and rebuilt their own worlds just as relentlessly as they helped others. They did not see themselves as heroes. They never had. They saw themselves as survivors who refused to let anyone else face extinction alone. A young cadet once asked Admiral Calder why humanity had agreed to the original quarantine centuries ago. Calder smiled. Because we knew we weren't ready yet. Ready for what? The cadet asked. For responsibility. The cadet looked confused. But you are now. Calder looked out at the stars. "No," she said honestly. "But we're closer than we were." Far across the galaxy, a new distress signal flickered briefly, then stopped. Pirates vanished without explanation. A border war ended before it began. No human ship was ever officially recorded at either event. No one needed confirmation. Legends changed tone. Stories once told to frighten children were now told to comfort them. If things get bad enough, humans will come. Not as conquerors. Not as gods. But as stubborn beings who refuse to let the universe win. High Speaker Lyrian recorded her final message before retiring. "To whoever hears this," she said calmly, "remember what the humans taught us. They did not save us with power alone. They saved us by proving that survival is an art, one learned through pain, failure, and refusal to surrender." She paused. The galaxy feared humanity because it misunderstood them. The truth is far more terrifying. They care. The galaxy learned many lessons after Alaris. But the most important one was simple. Never push a peaceful world to desperation. Never assume kindness means weakness. And never forget. When the universe grows cruel enough, humanity answers.